Hello and welcome to the WARC Podcast. I'm Alex Brownsell, Head of Content at WARC Media. Today is day 4 of Cannes Lions and we are recording daily episodes of the WARC Podcast from our studio here in the main Palais. There's already 3 new episodes in your WARC Podcast feed right now, jam-packed with the latest insights, big names and bold ideas we've been covering at Cannes Lions this week. While you're at it, tap follow and maybe give us a review if you're feeling especially generous. On today's episode, we're talking about creativity as a strategic growth engine in an era of obsessive efficiency with Chipotle's Chief Brand Officer, Fernando Machado. A new model for Chief Marketing Officers to work with their sustainability colleagues on creative work that avoids greenwashing with Kantar, and how Mastercard has brought creators into its long-term brand platform with great success. But before we get to the news and our guests, here's a quick message from our sponsors, Circana.
Streaming, creators and commerce-driven video are reshaping media faster than the traditional measurement models can keep up. Circana's Future of TV research explores how marketers can navigate fragmented viewing behaviour, evolving consumer expectations, and the need for outcomes-based measurement. With its AI-powered solution Liquid Mix, Circana helps brands connect TV and video investment to real business growth, driving faster optimization and holistic measurement. Download the latest insights at circana.com/walk.
Anna, what's making the headlines today?
Tonight we have some heavy-hitting lions to be awarded. We've got creative effectiveness, creative strategy, creative commerce, and of course luxury. So these shortlists are already live on lovethework.com, and if you've been eagerly awaiting these results, those winners will be live on Love the Work from 10 p.m. France time this evening. So of course we also have the full case studies for the creative effectiveness entries. Those are available on walk.com for subscribers from tomorrow, Friday the 26th of June. So be sure to check those out if you're a WARC subscriber.
Yeah, we're all eagerly waiting the CREF winners for sure. What else has been going on?
So new research unveiled by Kantar and global branding agency JKR at Cannes Lions yesterday showed that only 28% of brand equity is built via paid touchpoints, with direct and indirect experiences accounting for the rest. So this is a real challenge to how most CMOs currently prioritise their budgets. Some key data points from the research: 71% of brand equity is built by direct and indirect experiences, paid media accounts for 28%, earned media 41%, and owned media 30%. Second point, brands that improve their customer experience and amplify it are 2.5 times more likely to significantly grow their market share. And finally, customers buy twice as much when they have a strong affinity to a brand. So that's 50% versus 25% of those with low affinity. The key for brands, the report says, is to build distinctive experiences because those are ultimately more meaningful and will drive faster growth.
Interesting research. Shall we have one more piece of news for the day?
Yes, so last on the agenda is a stat that I thought was really interesting from WARC's session on doing more with less. And I know that's a phrase that a lot of marketers have heard about. But some new data from CreativeX shows that 93% of ads from Fortune 500 companies that run on digital platforms have less than $10,000 of media spent. So that's based on 633,000 ads from 149 advertisers and 6 major markets. So that's a huge data set from CreativeX. Close to a third of total ad budgets in that data set now sit in the sub 10K bracket, a sign of really how strong the algorithmic pull towards small, cheap ideas and executions has become over the last couple of years. What we're seeing is that ad volume, in terms of the number of ads, that's up, but average spend per ad is down. So this data really underscores the reality of marketers doing more with less over the last 2 years, and of course that is a common theme that we've been hearing at WARC over the last year as well. These stories are brought to you by WARC News, our daily email newsletter. Go to walk.com/feed for much more information on all of this new research and all of the stories we've been covering this week.
We're living in a marketing era obsessed with efficiency, with optimization, with dashboards, with shortcuts. AI promises speed and lower costs. Consolidation promises scale. Performance marketing promises certainty. And yet, brands are getting weaker Work is getting safer and growth is getting harder to achieve. In the view of Fernando Machado, Chief Brand Officer at Chipotle and a 12 times Cannes Lions Grand Prix winner, that's not a coincidence. In his keynote today on the Cannes Lions stage, Fernando exposed the traps brands keep falling into and sets out a new definition of creativity for an efficiency-obsessed world. Creativity not as decoration, but as a strategic growth engine. And I'm thrilled to say that Fernando joins us now. Welcome to the WARC Podcast.
No, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No, very, very good to have you. You've long spoken about the essential role of creativity and the role it plays in long-term growth. This is a challenging environment at the moment for many brands, particularly in categories like quick service retail. Some consumers are cutting back on discretionary spend, maybe eating out less. How can marketers use creativity as a lever in these more difficult economic times to ensure their brand maintains momentum?
Yeah, I think that the hardest it gets, the more important it is to be creative. To me, growing up in marketing at Unilever and then Burger King, RBI, and Activision Blizzard, and now at Chipotle, I've seen firsthand that you never have all the money that you need to do the things that you need to do. When I was at Burger King, the main competitor, McDonald's, had 4 times our budget. Not only that, they're an amazing brand, great marketing team, and they have more locations and QSR, quick service restaurants, is convenience is important. So having more locations counts points. And even when I was market leader with Dove or Call of Duty, we never had enough money to accomplish the crazy targets that we had, So the hardest it gets, the more creative you have to be. Creativity has proven again and again that you can do more with less, that you can do faster with the same, and that you can create a kind of a dollar multiplier on your investment by doing things that will stand out and that people will notice. So that's kind of the game that I always try to play.
In your keynote, you spoke about some of the traps that marketers can fall into when it comes to creativity. What are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen in your career, and how can marketers avoid them?
Yeah, look, some of the mistakes are mistakes that I did too. I'm guilty here. I think that a common mistake, for instance, is for you to come in new to a role and basically assume that everything was wrong. And trying to change everything. You come new and you change the tagline, the logo, the visual identity, the campaign idea, all the stuff. That doesn't work. It takes time to build a brand. You think about Dove. Dove was born in 1957. I stayed on Dove for 4 years. We did some cool stuff, but 4 years is a drop in the ocean, in terms of how long the brand has been in market. So it's much easier and more efficient for you to build on what's in there. And I think it's just nicer for you to always assume that people who were there before you were actually very smart. And if they haven't done certain things that you think they should have done, there is probably a reason why. And you should try to learn that before you criticize. I think another common mistake that I see is for people to jump in the new thing. Today's AI, a couple of years ago was metaverse. Some years before was purpose. There is always these waves. I do think AI is a bit different, but there is always waves of interest, and people go all in on those things, and they forget that actually the fundamentals are probably the most important thing. When I say fundamentals, it's having a clear brand positioning, knowing how to brief, knowing how to nurture ideas, having a strong creative criteria, have a great relationship with your creative partners. I tend to invest much more time on those things. I'm very curious about things. I play a lot of AI. We use AI. It's not new, really. We are using more and more. But I probably spend much more time on the things that I know are not going to change. It's very hard to predict the future. So I experiment with the future, and I'm curious about the future, but I really try to master the fundamentals, and I think that sometimes marketing folks get too excited with these new sexy things, and they forget some of the basic fundamentals. Those, I think, are 2 common mistakes. Coming new, trying to change everything, reinvent the brand, and 2, jumping on the next thing before mastering the fundamentals in marketing.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I mean, at Cannes Lion, it's it's the place for the shiny new thing. There's so many attractions, there's so many new technologies and new tools, but I think that's so important about staying true to the fundamentals. Could I ask about risk and how you would see how do you balance creative risk and rewards, I guess, with the potential downside? How do you view that?
Yeah, I think that risk is relative. Like sometimes some people think that something is risky when it isn't. And sometimes people think that something is not risky and is actually existential problem for your brand. It's funny because in marketing, I think that one of the key roles we have is to build differentiation as much as we can for the brand, the product, for the company that we are in. If you're going to build differentiation, you probably need to do things that are different, right? I mean, it's a pretty logical statement to say. If something is different, it probably has a little bit more uncertainty than if you're doing the bread and butter that you've always done, or the category, the product category or service that you are in has always done. If there is uncertainty, there is fear. And if there is fear, we are all like very smart and mostly logical. Like we have the tendency of brainstorm what can go wrong and kill the idea before it becomes a great idea. And I think that's why people struggle with like approving or saying yes to an idea that feels different, which has a much higher chance of succeeding than if you're doing wallpaper, doing what everything is doing, like doing the category cliches of the category that you are in. But the thing is, if you slap a celebrity and and use a bunch of cliches, usually, like of course there are exceptions to what I'm saying, but usually your CEO, CFO, your board, they're not going to complain. It's not going to be efficient, it's going to fail, but they will have that sense of comfort that, oh yeah, like this is familiar, we've done this before, it's easier to predict what the outcome will be. And normally, at best, they will be average. There is a quote that I love from Bill Bernbach, which is, if your advertising goes unnoticed, everything else is academic, right? And I truly believe on that. It's not just advertising. If anything that you do goes unnoticed, it doesn't matter, right? So to me, the biggest risk is for you to do something average that will not stand out and put a ton of money behind that in media, and it's not working, it's not cutting through, put even more money to see if, like, through repetition that will land. That I'm more afraid of that than doing a campaign that I aim for the stars and it didn't work as well as I wanted. But still, if I aim for the stars and end up in the moon, it's better than just staying on planet Earth, right? Doing the same as always. And I think you learn more too by trying to stretch yourself and push the boundaries of creativity. It's a journey, right? I mean, sometimes a company can be more conservative, or they are in a category like a bank or healthcare that people tend to be more conservative. Okay, do a baby step in the right direction, right? I mean, play the long game and keep moving to get more yeses to the ideas that may look risky, but actually have a much higher chance of succeeding because they will stand out than doing yet another bank ad with a celebrity smiling to the camera and holding their debit card. Well, that's not going to work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I think that there must be something potentially, I guess, it's quite intimidating when you see some of the amazing Grand Prix winning campaigns that come out of Cannes Lions. There must be potentially a perception that this thing emerged fully formed and perfect.
That's so true.
And it presumably didn't. There was those missteps along the way.
That's so true. And some people don't realize that. Like that ideas, when they are born, they're like a baby lion. When a lion is born in Cannes, at first it was a baby lion. Like the baby lion is very easy to kill. Like it's different, it's unique, it's a bit uncertain. We don't have the answers to everything because it has never been done before. We brainstorm what can go wrong. We kill the baby lion. So I try to avoid that. You know what I mean? Like I see fear or uncertainty as a positive. I see fear as my reptilian brain kicking in to tell me that there is something different here and that's dangerous. But like I know my rational brain also knows that what looks dangerous may actually be what's going to stand out. So I think that many times the trick is not to be fearless. The trick is to do even when you are afraid. Like all the campaigns that I did for Burger King, Activision, Dove, like all the most iconic ones, we were scared. Couldn't sleep. You know what I mean? But we did it. Most landed well. Some didn't. We learn either way. Even when it goes well, there is always something that we can do better. So we always have this mindset of always in progress, which is the mindset from Lyle's learning. That's the line, by the way, I'm stealing here. And I think that's kind of what we try to do. Do things that stand out, that may look risky at first, but actually the wallpaper is more risky. There's a quote from Mark Zuckerberg, which is the biggest risk is not taking any risk, which I believe in that. That's the mindset we go when we are developing not just advertising, but product innovation, design, anything.
I think it's one thing, obviously, having that clarity of thought that you've just articulated within the marketing department, within the marketing function. You mentioned earlier that sometimes those maybe less creative ideas are sometimes easier to sell in at a senior level. How can marketers have those more effective conversations with their partners in finance, with the broader C-suite team?
Really good question. I think it takes time. Building trust and credibility takes time. Even if people say, no, we trust you. No, it takes time. Think of you as a person, not as a professional, right? It takes time to build a friendship, to build a relationship. It's not like that. So I try to invest a ton of time to bring people along with me in the journey. I try to avoid the big reveal. You know what I mean? I go work in progress, and I listen to feedback. I may not agree with the feedback. I'm not going to change something just because someone said something, but a lot of the feedback actually makes sense, and makes the idea better. So bringing people along with you in the journey, seeing the creative process as a creative journey, right? I mean, we didn't do Moldy Whopper on year one of Burger King. We didn't do Whopper the Tour on year one of Burger King. We didn't do Real Beauty Sketches on year one of Dove. We paved our way to be able to do those things because we're delivering the results, building credibility, building the case for creativity, showing that it was connected to a strategy with clear KPIs, to measure the performance and the objectives that you have for each of those things, and delivering results. And then as you do that, you start to kind of climb that cliff, to do dives from a higher place, and it takes time. And it's a shame that sometimes the tenure of CMOs is short. It's 2 years. The best work I did for all the brands I worked for were after 2 years. Not that I was doing bad work. We all thought it was great what we were doing, but over time, you learn, and you can push further those boundaries of creativity and do things that are even bigger. So it's a long-term game. It's a journey. You need to bring people along with you. You need to explain. You need to connect to the strategy, connect to the objectives. So I almost work with the two sides of my brain. The more creative side when I'm talking to the agency, the more rational and structured side when I'm talking to internal stakeholders.
One final question, if I may, for all of the young marketers that are listening to this, I'm lucky enough to have access to you. You're sitting across the table from me, but I wonder if the question they might ask is, what skill or skills should they be working on in terms of their own professional development, to make sure they stay relevant, that they, stay at the front of the field?
Yeah, I think that depending on who you ask, they may give you a different question. I tend to think that you can learn the skill. I think that most important, when I'm interviewing, for instance, I am looking for how curious the person is, how passionate they are about the type of work that we are going to do, and how much drive they have, how much passion I think is important, because it's not easy. It will be long hours. It will be a lot of work. You are not going to realize your full potential, I think, if you're not all in on doing what you're trying to do. So what I said was what was the first one? I'm just trying to remember what I said on the first one. It was being passionate, drive. No, drive to me, when I was a trainee or intern, I always started to position myself as someone that the rainmaker. I never felt that a task was too little for me. You see what I'm saying? Like, so I never mind doing. If you ask me to spend the whole afternoon sending faxes, which I don't think even exists anymore. No, I would be fine doing it, and it would be the best afternoon fax sender in the building. You know what I mean? I always try to be helpful. You know, like and I think that helped on my career. Like it opened doors for people to promote me or wanting to bring me to their teams in Unilever. Yeah, so like that's what I would say. You know, like drive, being passionate about what you're doing. I think and being curious, which was the first one. I think are the three advice that I would give for like someone who is more junior on their careers.
Well, that's fantastically sage advice, and for any younger listeners, just Google what a fax is and you can take a look. Fernando, thank you so much. It was
not fun, huh? It's really annoying. Like
the noise, no, they weren't great, were they?
And sometimes you had to call and ask them to give you a fax line, right? It was even more annoying because you could not automate the thing. Anyway.
Thank goodness for the internet. Fernando, thank you so much for joining us.
No, my pleasure, guys. Anytime. And congratulations on the podcast. Like, it has been awesome. It's amazing what you guys are doing here in Cannes, turning content around so fast. Thanks for having me.
Good news. Decades of benchmarking, insights and best-in-class case studies are now available at the push of a button. Lions Intelligence is the new operating system for creative marketing excellence. With state-of-the-art AI technology and established marketing insights from the WARC, Contagious IQ and WARC, all in a single adaptive workspace that evolves with your thinking. Save hours of manual work and share your thinking with clarity and confidence. Lions Intelligence is where groundwork becomes great work. Insight, strategy, creativity, execution, all in one place. To learn more, check out intelligence.lions.co.
Social-led marketing has become the default playbook for modern marketing, but scaling brands requires more than just a let's go viral brief. Today on the Cannes Lions stage, we got a sneak peek of WARC's latest research into the role social and creator strategies play in Asia, what they can do and what they can't. The key takeaway, social mechanics can sit at the heart of a creative strategy, but work hardest when combined with other approaches. From immersive gaming ecosystems to creator-led travel markets, more brands can move beyond using creators as amplifiers to making them drivers of commerce. Mastercard brings this thinking to life through gaming and travel, two of the most socially driven consumer economies today. I'm joined now by Kaveri Khullar, SVP Marketing for Asia Pacific at Mastercard, and my delightful colleague Rica Facundo, WARC's Managing Editor for Asia Pacific, fresh from the Cannes Lions stage. Welcome both to the WARC Podcast.
Hey, Alex. Good to be on this side of the mic.
Great to meet you, Alex. Yeah, and great to be having a conversation with you, Rica.
Rica, you presented some really important WARC research on the stage today. Creators have been a really big, prolonged theme at this year's festival. What does the research add to the conversation about the role of creators in the modern marketing mix?
You're right, Alex. You know, this year at Cannes, I spent a lot of time on Creator Beach because the unofficial way that we're all calling Cannes this year is Creator Cannes. And, you know, there's a lot of hype that's going into creator marketing. But Kaveri and I, in our presentation, we wanted to keep it real. There's a lot of money going into social and creator marketing. But the thing is, yes, we need to understand the potential of creators, but we also need to understand its limits so that we can use them effectively. And one of our big headlines and the problems that we want to address is that going viral is not a strategy, it is an outcome. And the thing that we don't talk about enough is that going viral is an unpredictable strategy for growth. Of course, we all want it, but virality is dependent on factors that a brand can influence but cannot fully control. Cultural timing, algorithmic favor, and most importantly, whether the idea truly resonates with your audience. And that is something that we need to understand the nuance of social and creator marketing, and we need to hedge our bets in other ways by using other touch points in the media plan, because creators is just one part of the ecosystem. Let's not forget that.
Absolutely. Kaveri, Mastercard has been a leader in brand building for so many decades. The Priceless brand platform has always been referred to as one of the best in class across the industry. How has social and creators then sort of added to that ecosystem, and what have been the challenges that you've had to navigate?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. We picked up an award, the inaugural Creative Brand Lions this week. So that was a great start to my first Cannes. Now, let me take you back to 1997. Priceless then was a campaign idea that was born from the insight, which was not as commonplace then as it is today, that experiences matter more than things. So your health and well-being far outweighs the riches in your bank. Now, it was just a broadcast idea then. The way it has evolved over time is it's become a participatory ecosystem. And what is the role that creators have played? Creators really have been co-architects of this strategy. They have been the co-architects of this evolution. And I want to bring that to life through an example. So we became the official payment partners of McLaren, and now we're also their title sponsors. This is back in 2025. It's a multi-year deal. Our promise when we talk about Priceless is to create money can't buy experiences and to connect people to priceless possibilities. How were we going to do that? By putting fans in pole position. But what did that really mean? Were we simply going to advertise it? No, that's not what we do. So we recruited Team Priceless. We recruited fans. And I want to clarify, not necessarily famous influencers. These are real people out there who have a real passion for racing and the racing lifestyle. We brought them on board and we turned them from just fans to participants. We gave them unprecedented access to experiences, driver time, garage tours, whatnot. And as a result of that, as I said, they became participants and they then expressed the essence of Priceless from their point of view. Now, there's a subtle but very important shift there. Priceless is no longer what we say to the world or how we express it to the world. It is the point of view that creators and partners express and showcase through their own lived experiences.
That's so interesting. So, it's not that you obviously the opportunity presumably would have been there to use creators to almost buy distribution, to buy amplification and reach, but that's not what you tried to do here.
No. And Alex, I use this phrase, it's important to work with creators as co-creators and as embedded operators. I think that is what is really crucial. And I will give you another example, which is what we spoke about today. It's called the Mastercard Lifestyle Navigator. Now, this is a large language model, a platform that we have created, which is all about contextual conversations in commerce. Where do creators come into this? Let me start with the brief, right? Because that's what all marketers do. And our campaign brief was, or the problem we were solving was really, we wanted a step change in the way we did our cross-border campaigns, because that's really bread, butter, and jam of our business. Now, is there a supply problem? No. There are abundant experiences and offers and benefits that we offer every single day of the year. Is there a demand problem? No. In fact, now more than ever before, consumers really want to curate their experiences when they travel, no matter where they're going. The problem was we didn't have a matchmaker, and we did not have what we call trusted intelligence. As many people have said this week, right? Information is abundant, trust is scarce. That is the role local creators are playing for us in this platform. So what is that role? I was coming to Cannes. I was like, I wish I knew a local in the city. Of course, I called Rica because she's quite the local here.
I'm sorry. I don't have any tips for you.
You've got enough expertise and you shared plenty with me. And in the absence of that, we want consumers to lean on these creators. So this LLM is powered by Mastercard platforms, Priceless.com, Priceless Experiences, Specials, Benefits, and Offers, but also by a pipeline of beautiful recommendations that are crafted and curated by local creators. And as consumers converse with this LLM, tell it where they're going, who they're going with, what they're after, what do they love doing. Experiences and offers that are powered by these creators start to surface. They are the spine. That's why I said they are the embedded operators. And they're sitting right there in the discovery to decision-making journey. And that links directly to commerce.
Can I build on that, Alex? There's a nuance in the phrasing that you said. I think I've always heard people talking about creators as co-curators, right? But you're saying embedded operators. But when you say they're co-curators, it feels like more of like a creative kind of exercise. But when you kind of frame them in the language of operators, right? That's when you kind of embed them into the wider ecosystem, not just in media touch points, but also how the business works. And that's, I think, how we're seeing a lot of the integration with creators and social, if they do it right, at least, so that it can kind of deliver that effect, because you need to be able to capture the demand that social creates for you.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, I think there are a lot of brands today that still do see creators very much through a purely media kind of lens, and there are a lot more opportunities that clearly you are unlocking, and I think e-commerce is a particularly interesting area because the customer purchase journey, there's been a lot talked about in Cannes this week about how that's really changing, how we're seeing really interesting things happening at the consideration, discovery and consideration phase. In terms of embedding creators into the kind of commerce journey, how does that process look? Does it look differently depending on the market, for instance, or the vertical?
There is no perfect science to this. And this is also where we have to allow creators to unleash their genuine, authentic creativity. And tell us how. It's a bit like you sit around a table and say, how are we going to do this? The local creators that I mentioned we are partnering are not people that we have only hired through an agency. We've had conversations with them. We've asked them, tell us, what are the hidden gems in Singapore, in Tokyo, in Kuala Lumpur, in Queenstown, right? So really bringing them on board as partners, as Rica was saying. And then understanding what that user journey is going to be. Now, in that user journey, there are multiple touch points. Which touch point is going to trigger purchase, is going to trigger commerce? There may be no perfect science to it. Of course, there is a funnel, but we know the funnel is no longer linear. But ultimately, there are ways for us to measure that performance. There is test and control. There are other ways to isolate just the performance of the creators. It is not perfect science just yet, I will tell you that. But there are enough metrics that we have. And again, back to the point I was making. Because this is not a transactional relationship where they're only playing a peripheral role, they are so intrinsic to what we are doing. The overall impact goes well beyond just transactions. It is on brand equity, it is on brand affinity, momentum, and love. So really, it is very holistic. Can we do perfect regression analysis and start to separate the threads? Not quite. But can we demonstrate that by leveraging some of the best talent that we have there and bringing them on board as partners and brainstorming even our strategy sometimes with them, not just the execution, not just using them as media channels, we demonstrated impact. And I think that is how we would do it. Would it differ market to market? I don't think the broad principles do not change. Depending on how consumers react. In China, it is all about wallets and the wallet ecosystem, the super app ecosystem. The delivery there may look very different from the delivery, let's say, in Europe, where it is less so. So really it depends on what the market and the media and the consumer landscape is. But I think we're getting there. And as we do more and more work, we start to see how this is evolving, how even the performance is evolving.
I'll throw this next question over to both of you, so whichever of you would like to take it on. Because let's be honest, there's a lot happening in the creative space. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of creators. How do brands ensure that they can be drivers of real commercial impact, and sort of tune out the noise in that kind of creator space?
Earlier, I mentioned one risk of using virality as a strategy, that it is unpredictable. The other risk is that you are measuring success based on engagement metrics alone, right? You cover media, right? So anytime anyone wants to measure on engagement metrics alone, you just kind of have to roll your eyes a little bit. But, that can't be the case, right? Because it needs to be able to move the bottom line. And the thing is, we're only relying on engagement metrics that are tied to the platform. So one of the key messages in the PACE Principle report we're launching in July is the idea that social has 3 ceilings. And the first ceiling is the platform ceiling, which is basically constrained by the algorithm, right? And when you are constrained by the algorithm and you're only playing to that, what are you playing to? You're playing to engagement, engagement, you're talking about views and clicks and whatnot. And that is a very superficial level engagement. It is important as a signal, maybe, to kind of say, hey, there's an idea here that works with this creator, this product is doing really well, but what's next after that, right? I don't think we've kind of followed through on that line of strategy. So use it as a signal, but make sure that it is, in fact, kind of linked to that commercial impact.
Yeah, Rica, that's great. And I just build on that by saying a couple of things. We have to firstly recruit the right kind of creators. And what I mean by that is be clear about your expectations. What is it that you're really after? And that's the point I made earlier about not just famous influencers with millions of followers. Micro-influencers can be far more effective sometimes, not always, because they have engaged audiences that trust them and listen to them. The second point is do right by creators. Don't just expect them to do right by you, by the brand. And the way to do that, again, is being clear on expectations, allowing them to come in, bring them into the fold, not just as participants or as observers. I would say participants for sure, but also co-creation of strategy where possible, because they are very bright minds. And the third is what Rica said, You cannot. Over-reliance on creators and expecting them to change the world can very often lead you to what we call hype cycle traps. These creators can create momentum, they can create velocity or even hypervelocity. But what sustains that are the fundamentals of marketing. Let's not forget them. The physical and the mental availability, reaching out to all category buyers, ensuring that there is both breadth and depth. Commerce can only be a result of what is an ecosystem mindset, and all of us marketers need to have that. Without that, we're not being fair to creators, and we're definitely not being fair to ourselves and our brands.
I'm going to rebuild back on you, Kaveri, because you remind me of the other point from our study, which is that don't forget that media is an execution of strategy. You need to start with your objectives and figure out the best strategy to get to that, right? And you mentioned micro creators. And interestingly, in our study, everyone's moving from, big celebrity influencers and, we should do micro nano influencers. But why? Why should we use micro versus, more celebrity influencers? Micro nano influencers work really well as a targeted strategy, which makes sense, right? You need to target a particular niche or community. But if you're running a campaign where you need to get as many people as possible, you need to bring in the big hitters, people who are familiar to many people across multiple categories. So that's the why behind the strategy that we need to interrogate. And you should do not either or, depending on your budget, I suppose, but you need to do both in order to do that. And one of the findings from our study is that when you understand the logic and the rationale and the mechanism behind it, when you have an alignment between the targeting and the objectives, you can actually increase your campaign effectiveness by up to 70%.
Wow. There you go.
That is a mic drop moment, I think, to finish on. It's been such a treat hearing from you both. This is such interesting research. Rica, this is a sneak peek of what is coming in July. Can you give us a little bit more of a...
Yes, so it's at the end of July. It is the second edition of our Asian effectiveness study called PACE Principle. And, social is all quite fast, right? But what does it mean to kind of deliver sustained growth in that? And I gave everyone a sneak peek here at Cannes and everyone who's listening. So if you want to get a copy, please go on WARC.com or talk to your WARC folks. But really excited to publish that in July.
Yeah, I look forward to reading it. Well, thank you very much, Kaveri. Thank you very much, Rica.
Thank you,
Alex. Thank you, Rica.
For brands with their eyes on the horizon, climate change remains one of the most impactful issues they still need to manage. But in recent years, more brands have been called out for greenwashing. Most accidental greenwashing occurs because marketing teams bring sustainability leaders into the process too late. So today, market researcher Kantar proposed a new way forward, co-led creativity. It's a model where CMOs and chief sustainability officers co-own a brand's sustainability journey from the very beginning. The model offers CMOs a proven growth model for creative work that avoids greenwashing and builds brand trust, differentiation, and commercial performance. Joining us today to share more about the framework is Jonathan Hall, Managing Partner, Sustainable Transformation Practice at Kantar. Jonathan, welcome to the WARC Podcast.
Great to be here, Alex.
Jonathan, it's a really interesting piece of work. Can you explain to our listeners the motivation for putting together a framework like this? What are the types of challenges that it seeks to solve?
Absolutely. So I'm sure we've all seen the sort of data that people are demanding action from businesses. In our data, 74% demanding business responsibility around social issues, 64% around climate issues. But what we've seen in our work with the United Nations Global Compact is that actually there is a breakdown in between the two functions who are fundamental to the delivery of sustainability marketing in corporations. So when we asked marketers and sustainability professionals around the world, are we making progress and where should be our focus? We had 52% of marketers saying we're making progress, but only 35% of sustainability professionals. And actually the focus was quite different. So marketers felt it should be all around corporate reputation and building additional revenue streams, whereas the sustainability professionals were, not surprisingly, much more holistic. And so the understanding both of what constitutes sustainability within a corporate environment and the degree of progress we're making is really, quite distinct. And yet we know that the context that we're operating in is one where trust in brands and businesses is being eroded to a really rather worrying degree. 57% of consumers in our latest data saying that they have seen or heard false or misleading information from brands. And we know from Edelman's Trust Barometer that trust in leaders in government, business and media is at its lowest levels ever. And therefore we shouldn't be surprised that in our latest work, 83% of brands have a net negative consumer rating on sustainability issues.
Yeah, well, that's very worrying for marketers, I'm sure. If you're a marketer then, if you're a CMO, how can you identify those sustainability issues that their brands can lead in a way that feels, I guess, authentic and doesn't sort of lead to that risk of greenwashing, which further erodes the trust?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a question on the lips of pretty much all of our clients, and certainly at Asahi. And when Preeti and I were discussing this, it became clear that we needed a framework to put at the heart of the business that allows Asahi to translate the corporate sustainability strategy into the consumer context and into the portfolio strategy of their brands. So at a corporate level, they talk about environment, communities, responsible drinking, health and human rights. But then, of course, if you think about that on a diagram, there's a vertical there's a horizontal at the top. The horizontal at the bottom is the brands and their individual brand strategies. So how do you start to connect those two things up? And that, in essence, was the exam question that we started to address.
So let's go into that in a little bit more depth then.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of work over extended period of time, obviously, but in essence, what it's all about is starting with what Asahi calls the brand ladder. So, the classic things which you'd expect around consumer insight, reason to believe, the benefits, both emotional and functional, that then ladder up to the brand purpose. But if you're thinking about how you integrate sustainability into that, and a consumer insight level, it's not just the penetrating insight, it's also what's the urgent societal or environmental need that we're looking at. In terms of reasons to believe, okay, yes, of course, the brand roots, but what are the sustainability topics that are pertinent to consumers and in line with the brand and its DNAs? Yes, functional and emotional benefits, but also what's the content and what are the mechanisms that will allow us to improve people's broader lives that we know that they're asking for? And then finally, in terms of brand purpose, how do we build in alignment with the brand's broader societal and environmental role? So it's really using the brand ladder, and every corporation will have a version of that, and then building in these components. So that's how we started the journey.
Okay, look, well, that's the theory. Should we look at then, I guess, what happens in practice potentially? Why does joint ownership between sustainability and marketing in the way that you're describing produce a higher impact creatively and stronger business outcomes? What is actually happening here?
So I think what historically has been the case, and is still the case in many corporations, is you get this schism between the sustainability function, which is largely seen as owning the reporting and trying to make sure that the supply chain and scopes 1, 2, and 3 are all optimized in line with the ESG strategy. And then across the corridor, you have the marketing team, the CMO, and the owners of each of the individual brands, if it's a multi-brand portfolio, and they have their commercial objectives. And then, one day the CMO's phone will ring and they're asked to align their brand strategies with the sustainability strategy, or at least, how can they act as a vehicle for the realization of those. And the problem is that different languages are being spoken, and certainly our work with the United Nations Global Compact and also with the World Federation of Advertisers demonstrates that marketers feel very underconfident in this space. They feel that they don't have the competency and capability, and they don't fully understand the value chain. They only understand the part of the value chain for which they feel responsible. So they're neither going up the value chain into understanding where the products and brands are sourced and then how they're developed, nor are they going down the value chain into distribution and potential end of life, and then how you get into potentially a more circular model. And so I think what we're seeing, therefore, is that there's a requirement to build a capability in the marketing function, but then there's also the requirement for people to understand the opportunity that exists in different business models outside their normal area of competence.
Yeah, I mean, it must be, I guess, quite interesting for a marketer to be able to step out of not a bubble so much, but of the confines in which they're used to operating and think about the business, the products, the consumption so much more holistically.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Alex. And of course, any marketer will know that if they're really understanding the truths about their product and service in a very fundamental way, then that will lead to guidelines for their agencies to develop much more powerful communications, which will develop more impact in turn. And of course, there's tons of data out there which demonstrates that consumers nowadays are demanding authenticity. They're looking under the hood. They really need to be convinced that actually what is being transmitted to them is something which they can genuinely trust, because as we know, trust has been compromised.
Let's just touch then a little bit on how we actually know this works, measurement. Now this is something that's going to be discussed on stage, how Asahi's ensured that sustainability initiatives are translating into brand equity, into commercial growth. How does that work? How do you really know that this is actually a good idea, basically?
Yeah, well, the Asahi teams have integrated the thinking, and Preeti has worked very closely with the marketing function. And they've done some really innovative things about, Preeti comes to Cannes, the CMO goes to sustainability conferences. And then what we see in terms of actual output is things like the Peroni Zero work, which has won at Cannes Lions, incidentally, but has also, had huge commercial success as well. And then I guess the one brand that I would highlight is a beer brand in Poland called Juba, which is, we identified has a very specific connection with Polish wildlife. And there's some amazing, there are some amazing animals still that exist in the forests of Poland, which, some of the last wildlife in Europe. And one of those is the European bison, and that is the symbol of the brand. So it became a flag carrier for how Juba can actually have an environmental impact in a way which was genuinely authentic to the brand. And what we see, and those of you who come to the talk tomorrow can see, the evolution of the communications from one which was, I think it's fair to say, much more generic into one which had much more meaning and much more difference in the marketplace because of its stated relationship with Polish wildlife. Now, not in a way which was heavy-handed. It was contextual, and it also talked to the consumer benefits of the beer category, but nevertheless, it was raising these social impact issues, and the commercial results have been, really excellent.
Yeah, I think for anybody listening, probably not wandering into the Polish forests is a good idea. That heavy-handedness, I think that's an interesting point. Is that where marketing can help sustainability in understanding consumer, in understanding how audiences respond to messages and what effectiveness looks like in creativity?
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant point, Alex. I think, if it's a cliche to say that marketer superpower is storytelling, right? But I think the translation of the sustainability proposition and what are reasonably rational facts and reasons to believe, I think they can be built out by the marketing teams into really a connection with what makes this product, what makes this brand meaningful and different for consumers, that starts to build brand equity and drives both short and longer term sales growth. As we've seen with Juba, I mean, the market share has risen 15%. Brand sentiment has gone up 90% extraordinarily, and then associations with sustainability have also gone up 65%. So it's right across the piece.
Yeah, and it's those results that I think are the most persuasive thing ultimately, in making more brands take this approach. It's really important work. Thank you, Jonathan, for coming and sharing it with us. And look forward to hearing how it all goes.
Great to be here, Alex. Thank you.
That's all we have time for today on day 4 of Cannes Lions. Thanks to all of the guests for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow with our next episode from Cannes Lions, featuring more highlights from across the festival. Make sure you don't miss an episode of our daily Cannes episodes by tapping follow wherever you get your podcasts. And to read more content from Cannes Lions, check out WARC's free daily newsletter. Thanks for listening.